used extra help positions and then worked with supervisors to understand tasks in customized employment. So they were able to customize some jobs for folks with more significant disabilities than they were originally thinking about. My other hope is that you understand the difference between supported employment and customized employment, and you know the tools to use in customized job development. So hopefully one of those will ring true for you, and that's information you want. So let's go through what the different features of customized employment. Customized employment usually starts with discovery, and discovery is a process that's a little bit different in the sense it's really looking for when that person is at their best. And when they're at their best, what tasks can they do that would align with the need of an employer? So it's really looking at, as opposed to what training does a person need, it's really looking at who is this person and what do they need to be successful? When are they at the best? And it translates that information into tasks they want to do for pay. So that's the first step in customized employment. The second step is a customized employment planning meeting. And that is a meeting that takes all the information from discovery and brainstorms what would be possible for that person, and really looking at what are the tasks that highlight their skills, and going down to the detail of what's the environment the person needs, what's the type of supervisor the person needs, how long does a commute need to be for that person. So what are all the features that a person needs to be successful occurs in that planning. It also results in a blueprint for job development. So it actually targets employers in that area that have tasks the person wants to do for pay. The next step is, so you leave that meeting with a clear blueprint of what employers will be contacted individually for job development. The next step is the customized job development, and that has two pieces to it. It presents the concept of customized employment in a tool called the conceptual portfolio. And what that does, it explains what customized employment is, and it talks about how it aligns with other trends in businesses. We all know currently job sculpting is big in major corporations in terms of looking what a person's strengths are and how to highlight that to the jobs they do to ensure they stay, for retention, to ensure, because we all know somebody will take a job for pay. We also know we'll all leave a job because we don't feel valued. So in corporate America, they're thinking about, okay, how do we make sure people feel valued in their jobs? Which aligns very well with customized employment and what the concept portfolio explains, because it explains, here are the tasks this person wants to do, but what we want to understand now is what is your unmet needs. So how can we help you with your bottom line? How can we meet your unmet needs? So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. It presents the job seeker with a visual resume. And the rationale behind that is, for most of the people we represent, at least most people I represent, you know, a regular resume or vita is going to basically have very, very little to say. And so in our system, they go to the bottom of the pile because people assume, well, I looked at that, they don't have the skills. So with a visual resume, you highlight who that person is and the skills they want to do. And it makes the person more real. It makes the employer more engaged that, yeah, hey, this might work for me. The next piece of customized employment is a benefit needs analysis. And I think in our current state, with incredibly high unemployment, with people not knowing whether or not, one, people don't know if they're going to go back to work, businesses don't know if they're going to make it. Benefits needs analysis is an incredible tool. What it does is it goes and looks at the workflow within the employer's business. It looks at if certain tasks were done, would that help profitability? If certain tasks were done by somebody else, Would that help? Because lots of times we believe in multitasking. So you have very high paying people doing tasks that really somebody at a lesser pay level should do. So the benefits needs analysis is a great tool. So tasks are aligned with what the job seeker wants to do and what the employer's needs are. That does not necessarily come from a job description, because we all know with job descriptions, they rule out a lot of people we represent. Because there's a lot they can do in that job description, there's a lot they can't do. So if you break it down, looking at tasks, and you can see and you can help the employer see how that meets their need, all of a sudden, you've got a really strong ability to employ somebody. The last piece of customized employment is negotiation. And there's a negotiation of duties that match the employer's need and the job seeker's contribution. And I can't stress how important negotiation is. And for a lot of people, I don't know if there's any providers on the line, but I know when I started in job development, and I know that I didn't receive any training in negotiation when I was in college, when I got my master's degree. And I actually went to the Dispute Resolution Center to learn how to negotiate. They had a training. And I think negotiation is an important skill that every job developer should be able to do, or anybody that represents a person. So that's my spiel on negotiation for y'all. Okay, so why is customized employment useful? And I put this cartoon up, one, because I like it, but also I think because it highlights why it's useful. And the cartoon says, on the upside, at least Rob had completely forgotten about his fear of elevators. And part of customized employment is that is true in the sense that we look for what is positive about a person and how do we build on it, as opposed to looking at what's wrong and how do we provide solutions on it. We really look at what's right and how we build on it. But that doesn't mean in discovery we don't negate some complexities a person has, because that's also looked at in discovery, and it's looked at, okay, if this complexity exists, what's the solution to that? How do we get the person to where they're viewed positively? And I firmly believe this is a major shift in thinking. If you can make that shift, if you can always look for the positive first, it really changes everything. All of a sudden, you're not thinking, oh, gosh, that person's too disabled to work. All of a sudden, you're thinking, okay, what would it take? How do we structure that? When are they at their best? What do they need? And it helps us ask different questions. It also helps us change our assumption. Because one thing few of us will admit, but I think it's really true. When we think about employment and when we think about employing people with disabilities, particularly folks with significant disabilities, we become the gatekeeper. We start saying, oh, no employer would ever accept that behavior, as opposed to saying, what kind of situation could this person function in where the employer would accept it? To tell you a really quick story, a friend of mine was working with a person who, due to his disability, loved to break glass. And anytime he was around glass, he found a way to break it. Well, all of a sudden, you first initially start thinking, there's no place he can work because most environments have glass. And so the time was spent to say, okay, what are his strengths? What are the tasks he wants to do? And where is an environment that is relatively glass-free? And they came up with him working on a farm with horses, because in the barn, there is no glass. So all of a sudden, as opposed to having the assumption due to this behavior, somebody can't work, it forces you to think differently. And I think that's amazingly powerful. Okay, we all know that nobody goes to work unless somebody believes in them. Everybody on this line, somebody believed in you. Somebody said, oh, you can get that degree. Oh, you can get that job. And we all need that. And what discovery does is it creates belief. It creates belief that, yeah, you can work. We can figure this out. And people need to be able to picture themselves working in order to put the energy into a job. Lots of you, I assume, have asked somebody, what do they want to do? And their mind goes blank. You know, they want to do pushing carts, the grocery store, because that's what their friends do, because their knowledge base is really small and they don't trust their strengths. So one thing discovery does is it starts highlighting for a person what they're good at, what their strengths are, and everybody brings strengths to the table. And everybody brings strengths that you can build on. So we're not going to do this now, but you know, this is, I think, a really good thing to help your staff do, or do yourself, is just visually start thinking about a person that you're really struggling with. And think of them working. Think about, what are they doing? Think about, what does a business look like? How does it highlight their strengths? Think about, who are they working, and how does that, who they're working with, highlight their best qualities? Think about what time of day it is, because all of us, you know, I tend to be a morning person, and by the afternoon, don't give me anything hard to do because I'm fried. There's other people who are really good in the afternoon, and do not give them anything hard to do in the morning. So it's like, what time of day is it? How do you structure that job to highlight when they're at their best? And also think about, what did you do to make it happen, or what do you need to do to make it happen? I think this is a really useful, like, simple exercise for folks to do with people that they start thinking, oh, I've tried everything. There's no way this person can work. You know, revisit it. Okay, so how do we do customized employment? And first I'm going to bore you, and then I'll stop and see if there's any questions, but I'm going to bore you with kind of the federal definition, okay? And customized employment, a flexible process designed to personalize the employment relationship between the job candidate and the employer. And we talked about that. We talked about that because we've targeted employers that have needs that our candidate can address. It's based on an individualized match between the strengths, conditions, and interests of the job candidate and the identified business needs of an employer. So in order to do customized employment, you got to do that needs benefit with the employer. Okay, the key features are a negotiated relationship with the employer. There is nowhere in any law that says an employer has to do customized employment. Customized employment goes beyond the ADA. So why would employers do it? Because it addresses unmet needs for them that are going to help them be more profitable. It's paid at least minimum wage, and it starts with it begins with learning when and where the job seeker is at his or her best. And I can't stress that enough. You've got to have that information before you move forward in job development. So the essential elements are the negotiation of a job duty. Job duties are set as a result of the negotiation with the employer. So you do the benefits needs analysis, you come back and you work with the employer and you say, I've identified these unmet needs. Are these really unmet needs for you? There's a couple important things in terms of the negotiation. It's one, are these unmet needs for you? And are these unmet needs that you want to pay for? There's a lot of people, every person can identify unmet needs in your office. Some of those people just live with and see no reason to pay for them. Others of them, yeah, there's a need. And as we move, hopefully, as we move out of COVID, there's going to be a lot of new needs that never existed before. And so it's advantageous of us to think about whether you do, the only piece of customized employment you do if you job develop is do an employer needs benefits. So it's individualized. It's involving a job for one person. It's not going in and looking at it and say, oh, well, Susie can't do that. Bambi can't do that. Well, maybe Rachel could. And so you have a whole group of people in your head when you go and talk to an employer. This is really targeting an employer around one individual. Now, customized employment occurs in businesses in the community or businesses owned by individuals. So it can also include self-employment. Customized employment facilitates mutually beneficial volunteer relationships. And why I say volunteer relationships is there is no federal law, there is no state law, there is no county law that says you have to do customized employment. The employer does it because, yeah, this will be beneficial to me. And obviously the job seeker does it because this will be beneficial for me. This is a job that matches me. Okay, job development agents are used as necessary to represent the employment seeker. And I have never seen customized employment occur without a professional doing the negotiation. That doesn't mean it can't. I just think that that's relatively rare. I think pieces of customized employment occur all the time. My bet is everybody on this line, after you got good reviews, good status in your position, everybody thought you did a great job, you negotiated your job a little bit. You changed your duties a little bit. Most of us negotiate our job. Once we're comfortable in our position, then we kind of tweak it to fit our strengths. And customized employment does for the people we represent. It occurs before the job because most people we represent can't do it after the job. Excuse me. And basically, customized employment presumes all individuals can work. And the employment is chosen by the individual who's going to be working. So let's just real quickly do this. You know, for most of us, and I would actually bet for all of us on this line, we all got our jobs through a labor market approach. We started with an employer's need. We looked at it, we said, yeah, I can do that. Maybe we tweaked our resume just a little bit so that we looked a little bit better than we were. So we got an interview because we all know the game. We want to get to the top of the pile. So we showed how we met the requirements. And then we got an interview. And once again, in the interview, we perhaps presented just a tad bit better than we were because we had to compete for that job. We wanted to get that job. And a statistic I saw a couple of years ago, which I thought was amazing, was that 80% of employers are unhappy with their new hires. And I started thinking, why in the world would that be? And then I started thinking, well, of course, when you're in an interview, the employer's playing the same game you are. He wants or she wants to represent their business as a really good business. They want to represent the job as really cool, so you take it. So maybe they embellish a tad. And then maybe you embellish a tad in terms of your skills. So when you actually get in the job, there's some adjustment. And during that adjustment, yeah, the employer's probably a little bit not as happy as he thought he was going to be because all of a sudden he's realizing you don't walk on water. And this cartoon I just think is how I have felt when I applied for a job. I'm looking for a job in customer service, so I'm distributing my resume. And you do feel in this, you feel like you go into a black hole. Did they get the resume? Didn't they get the resume? Are they going to call me? And, you know, after a couple of weeks, you figure, okay, let's keep going. They're not going to call me. That tends to be the labor market approach. That tends to be how most of us get our jobs. One thing about that approach is it's really based on competition. And with customized employment, we have a lot of folks who have unique, great skills. They just don't compete well. So the traditional labor market approach doesn't work so hot for them. So there's a customized approach, which is a little bit different, that you first need to learn about the job seeker and when they're successful. So what do they bring to the table? What are their contributions? What are their skills? What are their interests? Because we all know if you align an interest to what you're doing all day, it makes your job a lot more fun and you're a lot more excited about going to it. And what are their conditions for success? And when we think about conditions, I personally think it's really important to think about them as a deal breaker. All of us have conditions that are deal breakers. You know, when my kids were little, it was a deal breaker. I would not accept a job that I didn't have some flexibility. If something happened at school, that I could leave immediately to see what trouble my kids have gotten into. But so we all have conditions. For some of us, it has to do with who we support at home. For some of us, it has to do for transportation. You're not going to spend 5 hours in the car every day. So if we all have conditions, that may be a great job, but I'm not going to take it. They're a deal breaker. And for folks with disabilities, these conditions are really important. For some people, they can be a great worker. But if they have to have more than one supervisor, the whole thing falls apart. For some people, they have to be left alone to do their job and then somebody check on them, or the whole job falls apart. So in discovery, it tells us what a person needs to be successful. And those are critically important. And for some people, as stupid as it sounds, that bowling league that they go to 3 times a week that starts at 4 in the afternoon is a deal breaker. They have to have a job that they're off by 2 because they're not going to give up their bowling. It looks at tasks that a person wants to do for pay. Then it looks at the employer. If we have all this information, it helps us hone in on the employer and who has a need that the job seeker can address and wants to. It negotiates a job that meets the job seeker's needs and the employer's. Is there a question? Okay, I'll go on then. So one thing that's key in customized employment, really key, is tasks. And for some people, that's a switch in thinking, because if we break down a job description, we all understand tasks, but we usually don't think about creating tasks that meet a person based on the array of tasks an employer has in his workplace. So skills are what employers usually look at when they hire you. Oh, you went to this college. Oh, you can do this. You can do that. They look at your skills, but tasks are what they pay for. So there's a little bit of a dichotomy. I'm looking at your skills, but we got these tasks over here that I'm going to pay you for. And even if you have the best skills in the world, if you don't do those tasks, you get to be gainfully unemployed. So what this kind of does is does a marriage of tasks and skills. When we look at tasks rather than job duties, why did my screen go? When we look at tasks rather than job titles, we start to see possibilities. And that's the most important thing in my mind in getting somebody with a disability or complexity a job. I've got to be able to see possibilities, because if I see possibilities, I can start thinking about who in the community has a need for this possibility, as opposed to, well, what can this person do? It changes my mindset. And tasks, we all know this, but I'm going to bore you with it. Tasks are steps of a performance activity. If somebody has the skills, it's reasonable to assume they can do a task. Most people on this line, I bet, have a driver's license. I assume you can parallel park. I may be correct. I may be wrong in that. But, there's some assumptions we make. I have all the skills to do laundry. It's reasonable to assume I can do the task of folding clothes. Or I could learn how to fold clothes in a reasonable time frame based on the skills I currently have. And that's an important piece of it, is like extrapolating. If you have these skills, how do we build on it? What can you learn from that? What can you do from that? Okay, so it isn't just supported employment. And I'm going to go through how it aligns with supported employment and how it's different. So the overlaps are, we know this, work occurs in an integrated individual work setting in the community. Another overlap, which is not on this, is supported employment came first, right? Supported employment came in the Rehab Act of the Revised Rehab Act of 1972. Customized employment came along a lot later. Customized employment came along later because there was a realization, as great as supported employment was, it was missing a whole group of people. And that's why customized employment came into existence, with the realization that if you were somebody who had multiple disabilities, had multiple complexities, your chances of obtaining employment were a lot less. But they both, employment results in pay at prevailing wage or the going rate. It also overlaps, and employment outcomes can include creating a job through self-employment. Both techniques utilize job carving, restructuring, modification, or job creation. And that's why lots of times when you talk about customized employment, people will say, I got it. We've already done that. We've been doing this for 25 years. And it's true. They've been doing lots of pieces of it, but not the whole global, not the whole shebang. The process starts with the person, not the employer's requirement. How many of you, I don't know if anyone on this line has done job development, but you know when you used to do job development, you would look at the employer wants that, they want that, they want that. Oh, I think Sally can do all of that. But you start with what the employer's asking. With customized employment, you start with you start with knowing the individual and what the individual wants to do. Job development is individualized, and we've already said you represent one person at a time, okay? And the job seeker determines how they will be represented to an employer. Later on, I'm going to talk about visual resumes. I know that when I've worked with individuals with mental health issues, they did not want visual resumes, because they did not, on a visual resume, you have a picture of a person. They did not want me to use their picture to community providers. So you have a discussion of, these are the tools, this is how I represent people, what works for you, what doesn't work for you. Okay, the point of origin is different. Customized employment focus at the beginning of the employment process. I'm sure some people, when they graduated from college, read the book, What Color's Your Parachute? Which I wish I was that guy, because every year he abdaces makes a fortune. But in What Color Your Parachute, it's very similar in terms of, it starts with, what do you bring to the table? And understanding what you bring to the table, so how that can align with the employers you contact. Supported employment tends to focus on the service needed to sustain successful employment once the job has been developed. And what is that? What is one thing we all say when we do supported employment? We talk about the job coach. And we talk about the support we offer. So their point of origin is a little bit different. And the foundation for customized is based on individualized determination of strengths, needs, and interests of the person with this disability. And it seeks to know where the person is at their best. And it's designed to meet the needs of an employment that highlights that person's contributions and puts that person in a situation of when they're at their best. As simple as that sounds, it's incredibly important. I don't know if any of you have ever worked in a job where the whole environment highlighted when you were not at your best. And one thing you quickly thought about is, how can I find a new job? Because none of us want to fail. Whether you're a person with a disability or whether you're a person without a disability, nobody wants to fail. And so it's incredibly important that we are in a situation that highlights a person's contribution and fits what that person wants to be at their best. When I look at tasks and bundle them together for a person in an employer, I look at 20% of the tasks that I know are going to be a slam dunk for that person. I'm sorry, I look at 80% that are going to be a slam dunk for that person. Why? Because pretty quickly on that job, they're going to look confident. They're gonna look good in that environment, and that's what I want the first impression to be. I look at 20% that are a stretch. And why do I do that? Because I want that person to be able to get a raise. I want to show that there's growth in this person, and the only way I can do that is as if there's some duties that are that stretch their ability. The other reason is we all know when we work a boring job, we get bored. And when we get bored, sometimes we get in trouble. You know, I almost lost my hand when I was in college because I worked in a factory, a plastics factory, and my job was to load the cups on the conveyor belt, and it was incredibly boring. And I worked it at 10-hour shifts, so I'd make up little games. And the people at the end on the other end of the conveyor belt would sometimes play my games. So one day I wore my shirt tails out and it got caught in the conveyor belt, and I stupidly put my hand in it, and I started screaming. Well, the people on the other side thought I was screwing around. They didn't stop the conveyor belt till they saw blood coming down the conveyor belt. So when you're bored, you do stuff that is not beneficial to you, and that's true for anybody. We have all worked with individuals who, why'd you quit that job? It was such a good job for you. It's because they were bored to tears. So it's really important you have that kind of breakdown where there's a stretch for a person. Okay, so just a quick matrix. Some job seekers do not need support employment or customized employment. Some job seekers need support employment to obtain a job and retain a job. And I would say these are individuals who have a past work history. These are individuals who you don't have to dig for their skills. You don't have to really spend a lot of time figuring out what type of environment does this person need. It's pretty clear, and support employment works great for them. You know, I have a friend that says it's the effect of customized employment works for everybody, but not everybody needs customized employment. And so these are those job seekers who are ready to go. Some job seekers need customized employment to obtain a job. Their skills may be fairly unique. Some of the ways that they represent themselves may be fairly unique. And so they need a customized job that honors that and pulls out and highlights when they're at their best. And some job seekers, but do not need support employment to retain a job. And we all know folks who, due to how they present themselves, people don't see all their cool qualities. And so they need customized employment for that. For some job seekers, they need customized employment to obtain a job and support employment to retain it. They need that individualized job that's tailored to them, but then they need the job coaching support. Okay, I'm gonna stop for a second to see if there's any questions. And I'll take silence as there aren't any questions. Okay, so this is you know, the sales pitch here. Now, why is customized employment effective? Because it truly is the direction of future hiring. As you start paying attention and looking, and I read a lot of HR information and pay close attention to employment trends, and it really is as, you know, as COVID came and everybody or most people worked from home that were lucky could telecommute. You now see the trend that many businesses are thinking we're going to have people continue to telework. We're going to continue to have people working at home. And we see more and more structuring of jobs that meet an employer's need and rethinking how people work. It aligns with the applicant's skills and contributions to the needs or unmet needs of an employer. The other thing that I think is really cool about it, it results in engaged employees and engaged employers. Why are employees engaged? Well, we're all engaged when we have a job that highlights what we're good at. We're very engaged. We feel more confident. We enjoy our job. We want to go there every day. Why are employers more engaged? Think about job development and supported employment. A lot of times, what do? A lot of times we say we have a job coach. The job coach will train the person. Don't you worry your pretty little head about it, employer. We've got this covered. And when Abby's proficient, we fade. In customized employment, there's an active engagement with the employer, and there's active engagement with coworkers to provide training to the supervisors and coworkers to support the individual in the workplace. So people tend to be more engaged. By unbundling tasks, employers can remove duties that are being paid by hired paid workers that should be assigned to lower paid employees, thus improving profitability. You know, I once worked with a hospital that had their nurses go in and strip the sheets and clean the room after the patients left. And it was kind of like, this is a really expensive approach. I have an individual who would be great at this, and they would not be earning $65 an hour. So it's kind of looking at that, and sometimes that helps an employer being more profitable. By starting with what the person has to offer and seeking employers who have a need for those contributions, one, it creates belief and investment in the job seeker. Two, it's more efficient for your job developer. And you start to see possibilities. The process is both effective and focused. The process in discovery is probably longer on the front end than it is on the back end, because once somebody's in a position that's a good job match, then things tend to go more smoothly. Rather than asking who will hire this person, you ask who has a need for these tasks to be done. That's kind of a different question, and it changes the equation. Oops, sorry, I went the wrong way. So why is discovery important? And remember, discovery is the first step when we learn about the person and when they're at their best. What we usually know about people is just the tip of the iceberg. And for somebody with complexities who needs a customized job, we need to know more. So what discovery does, it results in pulling together all the complex pieces. And we know for any one of us, every person is complex. You may talk to my children and they would give you a totally different description of me than my best friend. We all show pieces of ourselves to different people. We're different at home than we are at work, usually. So it looks for when a person's at their best. It looks at their daily routine. It looks at their friends, their family, their community. It looks at familiar activities. And why do we look at familiar activities? Because if it's an activity you've done a lot, you're probably pretty good at it. And if you're good at it, it probably means that that's what you're going to look like once you feel confident at your work. And it looks at novel activities. Because for any of us, if we've never done a job before, if we've never done something before, we tend to be slower, more cautious, sometimes confused because we haven't done it. It also shows how a person learns, how a person takes information. And it also shows what a person may look like on their first day of work. You know, I have friends that tell me when they first met me, they really didn't think I could talk because all I said was, well, it was very nice meeting you when I left. um, which is not really my personality, but it is my personality when I'm in a new situation. I'm incredibly shy. I'm incredibly quiet. But once I'm comfortable, you can't shut me up. So these are important informations to know. It also looks at, we talked about this, which is critical, it looks at conditions. What conditions does a person need to be successful? It looks at support needs, obviously the task a person wants to do for pay, and what needs to be negotiated. So if you had all that information on a person, do you think you could find them a job? The right answer is yes, just in case you're wondering. Okay, so the steps to discovery is there's an intake where you explain the process, and you explain the process maybe a little bit longer than just finding them any job. There's scheduling a home visit, and there's a home visit. Why would you want a home visit? Because most of us are who we are at home. So by going to the home visit, you usually see a different side of the person. You also learn things that you would never know by just seeing the person in their office. You know, once I worked with a fellow and I went to his home, and his home was the most chaotic place I think I've ever been in my life. Everything was a mess. It was super, super chaotic. And then you went into his room, and his shoes were lined up perfectly. They were polished, and he had a lot of them. They were lined up perfectly. So that doesn't mean he's going to go work with shoes, but it told me something. It told me that when something's important to this gentleman, he puts order to it. And that's important, because when I first went in, I thought there's no order in this man's life. And being able to see there's order in his life was a really important information for me to build on for a thread. There's also the benefits discussion. And we know lots and lots of people have very legitimate fears around losing their benefits. And we also know there's tons of misinformation out there about benefits. So I always feel that those are discussions that need to start in discovery and continue through the employment process. Because whenever you're dealing with something that's difficult and complex, it's not you give the person the information once and they got it. It's like those are conversations that are reviewed constantly. We talked about this. There's observations of activity and participation and familiar and novel activity. And there's interviewing people who know the person well, asking, when is Abby at her best? Asking, tell me 3 things that you think Abby should be really proud of. Asking, tell me what it looks like when Abby gets frustrated. But it's interviewing other people that know the person well to get a fuller picture. And then there's another home visit where you review the information you've obtained to be able to say, this is what I'm seeing. Does this make sense to you? Does this fit with your view of yourself, with your parents' view of yourself? Once that is done and all the information is reviewed, you write a profile, which is a positive document that kind of highlights when the person's at their best. It highlights what works for them, what doesn't work for them, what their daily routine is, what their contributions are, what their conditions are, and you disseminate that so that people come to a planning meeting and they can start planning and thinking about what employers in the community would fit best. What are the what employers have tasks that the individual wants to do, and based on that, there's an employment plan. So you have the person with the disability at his or her best, the contributions, and what are the threads you see? You know, what are the things with my individual with the shoes and his chaos? The thread I saw was when he cared about something, there was order. So then it was important to find out What are the areas he cares about? And what type of environments would provide order? And it turned out that order was a really important thread for this gentleman. He really wanted order in his life because everything in his home life was so chaotic. And what are the tasks those threads lead to? Okay. And who in the community has a need for those tasks to be done? So before I start on profile, are there any questions?
I don't have any questions, Abby, but just to reinforce, you're doing a great job. Thank you. I want you to know we're out.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very
You
informative.
know, whenever you do a webinar, you feel like you're in this black hole.
I know.
Is anybody there? Okay. With discovery, I said leads to a profile. It's really important. It is, I can't stress it enough, how important it is that that document is positive. Think of how many documents folks with disabilities, particularly folks with significant disabilities, have received that is worded nicely, but in essence say, this is what's wrong with you, this is what's wrong with you, this is what's wrong with you, and here's our plan to help fix you. So this is different. This is written in descriptive language, providing the reader with a visual picture. Why does it provide the reader with a visual picture? Okay, everybody on this line has read a book and then gone to a movie and been disappointed. Because when you read the book, you had images in your head, and the movie didn't live up to the images in your head of what you thought that main character should look like, what you think about the scene should look like. So when we write descriptively, people get pictures in their head. They start seeing possibilities. And if this can, and you know, customized employment comes down to two things. It's seeing possibilities and being able to negotiate for those possibilities. It captures all relevant aspects of the job seeker's life, including the complexity of their disabilities in the solutions. You know, sometimes the solution is the environment a person needs to be in. Sometimes the solution is around timing. Sometimes the solution is putting in the person, finding a location where that person works, where there are coworkers that pay good attention to that person so they don't elope. You know, what the solutions are going to vary widely, but people have really complex lives. And so this helps us figure out what are the aspects and supports that need to be in place. It collects the job seeker's contributions, interests, and potential conditions and potential contributions for employment. So you kind of it helps you think, oh yeah, if you can do that, you can do that over there. Oh yeah, if you need this type of employer, well shoot, I was just in blah, blah. And they have that kind of environment. It gives you a structure for brainstorming. It translates possible tasks, pacing, learning styles, supervision strategies to a work environment. And all of those are essential for somebody to be successful in their job. I just read a statistic, and this was so sad. This is before COVID, so I didn't just read it. I read it before I knew about COVID, beginning of February. And it was 63% of people leave their job because of their supervisor. But what was the saddest thing was that none of them talked to their supervisor or their employer before they left their job. They just left because of their supervisor. So we know that thinking about supervision strategies and supervisors and the match is incredibly important. Okay, how come my screen's not moving? Oops, sorry. Okay, so not to belabor the points, I'll go over this quickly. The profile, usually it's written, it could be in a visual format, but it's got to paint a picture of who the person is. It's gotta have, if it doesn't have tasks that can be done for pay, you gotta go back and figure out what those tasks are. And I don't care, I once worked with a woman who basically could use 2 fingers. And from that, we had to figure out tasks. And it turned out after an interview with her sister-in-law, her sister-in-law said, yeah, she can access the keyboard with those 2 fingers. That opened up a whole world of possibilities. Contributions to offer an employer, what conditions are needed for success, and elements that need to be negotiated with an employer. Because just because you do customized employment, it doesn't mean a person's disability doesn't go away. There's going to be things that are going to need to be negotiated for that person to be successful. So it's based on what's learned. Just to recap, it's based on what's learned in discovery. It's written descriptively. It's got to be positive. And it creates possibilities for individuals. And this activity, depending on the type of writer you are, it can take 2 to 5 hours pulling all your information together. The planning meeting is obviously based on the discovery process, and it is super fun. It is super fun because there is so much energy and it's so positive. And for many people, it's the first time they've been in a meeting that talks about everything that's cool about them. It's the first time a lot of times parents have sat in a meeting that talks about everything that's cool about the person. It looks at tasks to be performed, not job titles. It's a brainstorming, and it requires thinking in terms of if a person wants to do this task, if the person has these contributions, what is the work environment? It also allows the person at the end of it to determine a hierarchy of when employers will be contacted. So this is the first employer I want you to contact. This is the second employer I want you to contact. So, one thing about job development, and I have job developed for years and years, is you can be kind of cagey as a job developer. You can kind of be, I'm working on that. We got that. They just haven't gotten back to me yet. But this is very concrete. It says such and such employer will be contacted by such and such a date. And the person or the family can call you 2 days later after the date and say, so what happened? Give me an update. It makes it more concrete. The other thing that it does at the end of it is it looks at who has contact with these employers. So there may be somebody that can assist the job developer in entering into that particular employer's environment. It directs job development to meet the characteristics identified. And the result of the meeting, which I just talked about, are the foundation for a plan. They're the foundation for a blueprint of who will be contacted. The one thing I just want to highlight, because sometimes it falls into this, the meeting is not about employment. It's not about it's about employment. It's not about the feasibility of whether a person can or should work. It's about figuring out where the person will work. And sometimes you have people who want to kind of draw it into, well, I'm not sure that's a good idea. You're past that. We're past that. This is about where the person will work. The other really important thing is the meeting belongs to the person. So that means when if you're facilitating the meeting, you turn to the person and you say, can I write that information up? Do you agree with that information? So you really try to make it the person's meeting, as well it should be, because in the end, it's the person's job. You're not going to go work it. The family and the individual determines who's going to attend the meeting, the timing of the meeting, so that they can be there and that they're in control. And sometimes it's necessary to determine the trump card. Sometimes if it's the person's meeting and mom says something and the person says, I don't want it up there, it's like, okay, it's not going up there. because it's the person's meeting. Okay, so I'm going to move now since I got tired of asking you guys if you have any questions. I'm just going to move on to customized job development. And customized job development is a little bit different than supported employment job development. The job duties are set as a result of a negotiation with an employer, focusing on the employer's unmet need and job seekers' contributions. Now, if you do support employment job development, you're probably saying, hey, wait a minute, we negotiate, which is true. You do negotiate, but usually what you're negotiating is pulling out a duty that your person can't do. There's driving in that. So you're presenting it as an alternative that goes away, as opposed to negotiating all of the duties. So it's important to understand the difference there. And there's also a theory which I think applies to job development that's from behavioral economics. And it is that people are always more concerned about what they're going to lose than what they're going to gain across the board. And so if we apply that to job development, when you're pulling duties out, an employer may say, okay. But later on, they may say, hey, wait a minute, I think we really need that. Or what happens all the time is a new supervisor comes. And the new supervisor says, hey, I don't understand why Jim's not doing this. Everybody else is doing it. That's not fair. And all of a sudden you're on a pathway for Jim losing his job. Pay is negotiated at a least minimum wage. And what I always like to do when I'm negotiating pay is I always like to ask this question to an employer: what's it worth to you? And if that employer tells me minimum wage, then I'm thinking, what other duties should we add so the wage could be a little higher? Because if it comes in too low, I've negotiated the wrong duties. But so it's based on the targeted wage set by the employment seeker. And I think, and not everybody does this, but this is how I do discovery. I always have a discussion with the family and the job seeker in terms of how much does a person want to earn? Because I think it's incredibly important that we tie work to wages. And for some people, they don't necessarily tie work to wages just due to the complexity of their disability. So if they don't tie work to wages, I want to ask during discovery, what do you want to buy with your first paycheck? I want to make sure that connection on some level is there. It's so the typical wage is paid by the position that contains tasks to be performed. I think all job developers are very good, whether it's support employment, labor market, whatever. They're very good at negotiating down wages. I think we've got to get a lot better at negotiating up wages for people. It occurs in regular businesses in the community or in businesses owned by the individual. It meets the employer's needs and benefits in relationship to the job seeker's strengths and needs and interests, targeted by the tasks to be been performed, targeted back to what we learned in discovery and what we came out of the customized employment planning meeting. So there's two important tools that I want to make sure I address for you. One is the conceptual portfolio. That communicates the concept of customized employment to the employer. So they understand the benefits needs analysis. So they understand that you're looking for tasks. So they understand that this isn't going to just be a slam dunk that you have 20 people that can fill their Christmas needs or holiday needs. That they understand that this is individualized to the employer and to the individual. It outlines the essential selling points that you offer to an employer, and it describes the support. So it's like when you leave that initial meeting with the employer, they have enough information to say, yeah, customized employment would be great for my company. No, I don't need this. But so you've laid it's not a sales job. It's like, okay, here's the pros and cons. Does this fit for you? That saves you a lot of time in the long run in job development. And then there's a virtual resume, which we talked about a little bit earlier, that introduces the job seeker through pictures and bullet points. And the reason for that is, as I'm sure everybody in this line knows, there's a lot of misnomers about people with disabilities. And one thing a visual resume does is it makes that person real. It makes that person just like anybody else on that particular employer knows. And it shows competent performance. Some of the misnomers around disabilities is, well, they're going to take up too much time. They're not going to competently perform the duties that need to be performed. This kicks out a lot of the myths without actually saying, hey, you have some myths that are wrong. It allows to have a discussion and show the person as a competent person. And it shows the unique features of the job seeker, how they're involved in their community. And it presents a task list of what the person wants to do for pay. And the task list is phenomenally important because the task list is what kind of drives you when you do the benefits needs analysis. You're looking for those tasks. You're looking for those tasks and then determining if that's a task the employer would want to pay for and determining if that's a task that would be beneficial to the employer. So it's not just about your person. It's also about the employer. Okay, so basically, the conceptual portfolio, which I already talked about, is a pitch book. It's to explain job development. The other thing is if you're in an agency that has a lot of job developers, it ensures that the same message is communicated by every person about your agency. I already said this, but it provides information about the concept rather than selling. It teaches the employer how to think about customization. And what's interesting in this is I think that was really true 8 years ago. More and more, I think employers are already thinking about customization. So this is not a new concept for many employers. There's a book that came out about 5 years ago, which is called Workforce for One. And I forget, one of the authors was Susan Brown. I forget who the other author is. I think you can get it on Amazon now for about 50 cents. But it looked at IT companies, and it looked at how they customized. And how they started it to keep employees, but then it increased their profitability. It's an interesting book if you have time. And it provides additional avenues for giving information to employers beyond verbal explanations because it shows pictures. And we all know that people relate to pictures. And if you can weave the portfolio and the visual resume more into a story for an employer, the more interested they're going to be. Because people remember stories. People remember pictures. They don't necessarily, unless they're baseball scores, they don't necessarily remember statistics and stats and facts. Okay, so the benefit to employers and employees, to the employers, is assistance in identifying workplace needs that might make them more profitable and will also meet the applicant and give them a qualified employee. It's the identification of support providers as necessary for customized employees. So it comes with support. It comes with you brainstorming. It comes with you helping them. And recruitment and matching of skills of the applicants to the employer's needs. That is a friggin' gift. That you have folks that you've spent the amount of energy into understanding this applicant is a good match for you. Because think about the employment process. It's usually a crapshoot. You know, my gut says you're good. It looks like your skills are good, so I'm going to hire you. Whether that's based on reality is questionable. And it's assistance in customizing job roles for current employees who have become disabled. It allows the employer to start thinking about, okay, we've got some return to work people who were just in a car accident. It helps them think about, how do I customize that job? To employees, the in-depth discovery is totally beneficial because it's going to result in a good job match. The customized planning assistant to target intentional potential employers speeds up the process, also ensures that they will result in a good match. The representation and assistance to negotiated, customized relationships. And it looks at resource identification to pay for the necessary supports. So real quickly, how much time do we have left, Bambi? Am I?
It is 11:38, so about 22 minutes.
Okay, then I'll relax. The visual resume offers an alternative when applicants don't have a resume that's going to make sense. The visual resume is a tool to introduce a job seeker who needs customized employment to potential employers, and it helps make the job seeker real. The other huge benefit that I've seen to visual resumes, and whether it's a visual resume in PowerPoint or whether it's a whether it's a video visual resume, if you involve the person in creating that, you have got them hooked and believing they can work. Because there's lots of people that we work with that think a job would be nice, but they're not totally sure that they can pull it off. By involving them in the process of designing the tool that you're going to use to represent them, all of a sudden you've got their buy-in, hook, line, and sinker. And it's so much fun. That's the other thing. It's just so much fun. So we've got discovery. And with discovery, we learn who the person is. We look at all aspects of their life. We do all of this not because we're nosy. We do all of this to get a really good picture of, one, what a person needs from employment, two, what excites them about employment, and where they're going to be successful. So discovery is your first step, and it's incredibly important that you have people do discovery, that you don't short step it. Because we all have short step stuff. Place somebody in a job that we thought would be perfect for them. Within 2 months, they've quit. So it's really important you spend the time thinking about and understanding who that person is and teasing out all their great skills. The planning process, which I already talked about, which I think is really, really critical, but also fun, because it's really an opportunity to learn more about that person. It's an opportunity to say everything that's cool about that person. And it's really important in the planning that you have a good facilitator. So you have somebody who can reframe things. So if you have Aunt Matilda that says, oh, Danny could never do blah, 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 you have a facilitator that can stop it and say, well, that's really interesting, Matilda. Could you please tell me one thing that you've seen Danny do really well? But you want to reframe it so it stays positive. And then there's customized job development, which the important pieces of customized job development is it's one person at a time. It's you're looking for tasks that person can do, that you negotiate with the employer, and that job is designed for that particular person. So now you guys have got to ask questions, because I don't think I was that clear.
I think you've done a great job. It was clear for me, but
Well, since you guys won't ask questions, let me ask you a couple questions. What didn't make sense to you? What do you say, oh, yeah, this is great in theory, but in reality, it's not going to work in my life? What were those issues? Are your names just there and you're not there?
Uh, They're there. I mean, I don't have an answer to that question. I can say that I know in our office, in the governor's office, we have hired people with disabilities, and you know, it was clear for me is that, you know, I've always said, as I've heard about customized employment, that, oh, we've done that, but we've done, like you said, done parts of that, and I think we've done it well and successfully,
Uh-huh.
but not completely. So I think, you know, a lot of people on the call are hiring managers or HR people, and so it kind of gives them some ideas of, you know, what they can do and how they should think about the process of hiring people with significant disabilities.
And thank you. That's really helpful. I I think the most important thing if you're an HR manager is really looking at your jobs and the tasks and really pulling out those tasks to say, would some of these tasks really be done better under a different job category? Or would this make sense to have this just be a separate category? I know that the city of Seattle, and I think they have about 200 people employed now. What they did was did a very, very basic job description that was incredibly rudimentary, and they used that as a tool to be able to go across departments to look at what jobs might be, what tasks might be possible for a person, but it still fell under the the civil service regulations. So I think there's a lot of ways you can do it, but I think understanding tasks and really looking at tasks, I think would be really helpful for HR people. So anything else?
Anybody want to share an experience? I think that would be helpful, like a real. See, we have some comments. Let me
Okay.
share those. From Gaynell Franklin. I'm new to this process and I have much to learn. This was very helpful for me this morning. And then from Teresa Smith, I've been doing job placement for primary visually impaired and blind and have not had much success in getting employers to job carve. What is the best way to approach this?
Okay, I have two contradictory thoughts going on in my head. But I don't, I think that in order to, if you're just talking about job, because I think customizing a job is different than job carving. The reason I think it's different is you're not starting from a job description. You're pulling together tasks that a person can do that the employer needs to be done. So that gives you more flexibility because you both come to the table understanding you're creating something new. When you're job carving, usually you're coming to the table pulling something out from a job description, when as soon as you go to pull it out, the employer says, oh no, my God, everybody does that. We have to do that. So I would suggest to you, oh, I just lost my, I would suggest a couple things to you. One, I would suggest a conversation with the employer, and I might use our current struggle with employment right now in terms of COVID. We know there's a ton of employment issues. And I might start there. I might start with, my agency is very interested in helping you move forward with your employment needs. One discussion I'd really like to have with you is the advantages to customizing jobs. So I might try to start there, so you at least, and then I would really start, then I would move in right into one service we offer is a benefits needs analysis to an employer. And if you email me, I can send you more information on this. But one thing we offer to an employer is a benefits needs analysis. The advantages to that is that we help an employer look at overall their workflow, their efficiency, tasks that aren't getting done, that need to get done, and we give you a report. If that's something that you're interested in, I'd be more than happy to schedule a time to do that with you. So I would try that approach. If you're going straight the approach from a job description and you're trying to pull something out, I would think long and hard rather than saying, I might ask some questions. I might start with the employer to say, tell me, what would happen if we substituted this duty for that duty? What are the pros and cons? What you're trying to do there is set a stage for a discussion that prevents the employer to say, nope, we never do that. So if you can have that discussion, you can start teasing out how to make it work. And that's all I got for you. Sorry. But email me if you want information on benefits needs analysis, and I'm happy to send that to you. Okay, anything else?
Abby, this is Rachel. Could you describe a few of the ways that the Arkansas project you worked with customized?
Sure. Sure.
I think that might be helpful, but from the state as model employer point of view.
Sure. What we did in Arkansas, we had providers we had 10 positions. We had providers do discovery on 10 people. We then submitted that information to vocational rehabilitation, and they opened a case for all those 10 people. We then had the provider and the participant fill out a written application for each of their individuals, and that went to one person and personnel who looked at that person, each of the 10 people's skills, and started looking where there might be positions that might make sense. And Joe and I, the HR person, went through all the job descriptions and kind of looked at how we make a job description that fits this particular person. We then did a training for all the supervisors that were going to be involved. And the training was kind of an overview of customized employment, like what I just did. But the bulk of the training was on benefits needs analysis and systematic instruction. So bulk of the training was as a supervisor or as a or your coworkers, they need to know how to train the person they're hiring. So we gave them a lot of information on systematic instruction so that when a person started, they got the right support they needed. The provider was also there, but we wanted to make sure that the supervisor understood the process, so the person was successful. And we tried to connect the individual with the disability to their coworkers as much as possible in doing the training, or the supervisors, because some supervisors wanted to train. The advantage, there's some pros and cons to that. So the advantage to that was, I think that the folks that the 10 people that ended up working, they started in extra help position. I might be lying, but I'm pretty sure half of them have rolled over into permanent positions. So that's a really good thing. And in Arkansas, the extra help positions, you basically can work part-time for a year, and each year you get additional hours. So it's not like you're extra help and boom, you're gone in January. You also get in their extra help positions. It's not bad. It's not great, but it's not bad. You get, you get vacation time and you get a tiny bit of money as a benefit, like when you leave your extra help position. So I think the advantage was we were able to sidestep Arkansas's online application process that just did not work for the folks we're targeting. We were able, based on the discovery, and it was tooth and nail getting the providers to do the discovery, but based on the discovery, we were able to align those folks with jobs that really made sense for them. So I think that was I think that was an advantage. I think training the supervisor has its pros and cons. I think training them was a really good idea because when people went in, they had a really good understanding. If I was to ever do that again, I would shorten the training because we put those poor supervisors through 3 days of training. We wanted them to know everything. So I would make it a lot more user-friendly.
But in terms of sort of, what we're doing in Louisiana, or, people thinking about stay as my employer and customizing, if people were, developed a good relationship with a provider, right, then they could look at their job descriptions and say, like,
Sure.
what are the kinds of tasks that,
Yep.
that we might kind of move job descriptions around. So some of the things that people, again, some senior people really are on their job descriptions, but it's not really great for them to be doing it, we could pull out tasks, right?
Oh, I think that's totally, I think it would be really cool if you could make that match between the provider and who's ever looking at the job descriptions, also the provider and the supervisor. Yeah, I think that's a great route to go.
But the focus here is on like really looking at your job descriptions and saying, what are these job descriptions where we really might really need some additional help, even as within a regular job description where, there are like these jobs that people just are just overwhelmed by, and we can change things around a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. And I also think, it's not rocket science. So
Right.
people looking at the job descriptions and people that know the department know where people are overwhelmed. So it's then just pulling out some of those tasks because you already know, at the end of the month, all this crap comes in that has to be data entered and all this stuff and we've got one person doing it. You already know that person's overwhelmed. So then it's just kind of analyzing it. Yeah. I think that would work perfect.
Sounds like a plan we could submit next year, Rachel. For next year.
We have to, I think it might be good to have like a little task force of people on the same task force really thinking about, because there's only a relative usefulness for the WAE program, and sort of really figuring out like, maybe it's, are there agencies that think that they could have some flexibility with how they looked at their job descriptions, because you don't want to start something that's not going to work. So it's like, do we have that ability to kind of relook at our job descriptions and think about whether there's a way of doing it that will help us more? Because it doesn't work unless it's going to be a benefit, to the agency. So I think maybe we might want to do a little work first on just kind of seeing if there's that possibility of, which I think there would be, but we want really, something for everyone to think about.
I think that would be great.
Bambi, what were you going to say?
I see Sue turned on her camera. Sue, were you going to say something? You came out of the dark.
Well, I noticed everybody else had kind of cut their camera. I'm so used to it now. I guess the first few times I did Zoom, like in the new environment, I was kind of super worried about, you know, every minute looking at the camera. Now it's not so bad. No, I just, I want to say, Abby, you did a great job. It's hard to do.
Thank you.
It's hard to do a whole overview like that. That's so comprehensive, and you made it really palatable. And it's nice to meet you kind of in person, or on, not in person, I guess. But
on Zoom.
It's nice to Zoom. Yeah. And I'm sure that everyone really got a lot out of it. And you know, they hear a lot of the traditional models, and you and the customized employment model does such a nice job of kind of bridging the gap where individuals with more support needs can find employment, and how the provider plays a really huge role, but that the person, the stakeholder, is really the person that drives the whole car. So yeah, you know, we're right now, the Human Development Center is in a pilot with WinTAC and University of South Florida to do, which you might know, but.
Yeah, I know South Florida has training.
So we're on module 4. So we're just doing the writing analysis, and we're just starting module 4 on Monday. And I think we're looking at doing the trainer pilot sometime in September, but as you know, the pandemic may
change that a little bit.
Yeah, I would think so. So yeah, we're just getting through the modules and trying to plan on how we might be able to do, to have Tammy and Amanda come and do some of their stuff alongside of us and alongside of a customer. So.
Oh, great. That sounds exciting. Cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, well, we're at the end of our time, and we really appreciate you, Abby, and I concur with Sue that it's really been helpful for me and made very clear. You made the information.
Good.
So I appreciate that. And we have some thank yous and some other people who want to get that benefit needs analysis. So maybe send it to me and I could share.
I can send it to you. Yeah, why don't I send it to you, and then you can send it to everybody. Cool. That'll make life easier. I will do that today.
Okay. Good. Okay. Well, thanks to everyone. Everyone have a good weekend and take care.
Thanks.
Bye,
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Okay. Bye-bye.